Hello, Stefano. Thank you for inviting me to reply to some thought-provoking questions. I will attempt to unpack them briefly here, and I look forward to engaging with friends and colleagues for more discussions during the two-day online conference you have set up for a couple of weeks from now. What first came to mind when reflecting on what era are we living in is my general sense that we are traversing tremendous upheavals, confusion, and disorders which are inducing record levels of existential anxieties. Perhaps the worst is disbelief in what has so far appeared to sustain us. It is an era of polycrisis in which we do not know where to turn. We may be under the illusion of living in a decolonized world. In fact, we are all colonized, all exposed to overlapping intricate forms of domination through the political, economic, media, surveillance technology, and AI-assisted military aggressions. In the Middle East, the policy of an ongoing settler-colonial expansionism is clearly visible. But in other parts of the world, we face a more disguised neocolonialism exacted through a network of multi-layered dominance. The second thought that sprung to mind is more hopeful. The rise in collective conscience through global movements apparently disconnected, yet intersecting through a web of interrelated struggles, demanding both change and conscientious attention. The Anthropocene era, provoked by human impact on nature, to the extent of irreversibly modifying it, has created a global climate crisis awareness. The murder of George Floyd, to give another example, sparked telling reactions across the globe, exposing a pattern of racial discrimination no longer acceptable to anyone who believes in democratic processes. In the spring of 2024, we also saw evidence of conscience in elite university professors actively supporting anti-war student encampment protests that spiraled across the globe. Jung in the Red Book described in word and image the critical transitioning from the Piscean to the Aquarian era of integration of the individual personality with the self. This can only be reached through the personal and individual responsibility for how we engage with the archetypal energies. Anti-democratic powers are trying to thwart the students' call and have already smeared their movement and found in their initiative grounds for deportation. Yet the fight for change goes on, because the era that has begun, which will last for decades, insists on birthing democracy anew and birthing it right. That goal would surely win the support of more than one court. The old system is dysfunctional, but the new configuration is not ready to come forth. So we live in an excruciating time of darkness where evil and evil-doing are more obvious than ever. That must be reckoned with as a reality we can no longer escape or blame on others. Rather, we must recognize evil as a force to be faced and confronted by human conscience. Whatever new forms of justice guarding emerge, equality and diversity must be integrated into them, or they too are doomed to fail. The question, what is happening to democracy? Democracy is not dead, but it is gravely threatened by leaders who have got away with preserving their positions by non-democratic means. Their claim that they were elected by majority is empty bragging. The inertia of good people elected them. There is a split wedged between the demos, the people, and the kratos, the state that claims to represent the people, while disproportionately benefiting the few in a position to pay themselves for convincing the many who do not know better than to trust them. Personality is king and is rife. While democratic values are being severely injured, democratic institutions are being undermined, and disinformation has become a new norm. Accusations are deemed proof, and opinions pass for self-evident truths. This is the new tautology, and it has put democracy on the couch to wake up. Why put democracy on the couch? My first reaction upon hearing this question was to ask, who is the analyst? How democratic is the psyche of the analyst treating the patient that democracy has become? How decolonized a mind does the analyst enjoy? But despite the above fears of further breakdown, democracy should be put on the couch. A balanced psyche is democratic by nature, and any good clinical work involves putting democracy on the couch by examining the nature of choice and desire. Instead of assuming that because democracy is so good and desirable, we must go out and bomb nations into democracy, we might turn our lens toward democracy's malignant side and find policies that we tolerate that are making democracy redundant. We have to ask, what are those policies' objectives? The malignant aspect of democracy is not hard to find. Simply ask, who turns up to vote, and then who is elected by default for lack of a better choice? And for the final question, how can analytical psychology help understand today's polycrisis? Analytical psychology has much to offer in looking at what underpins these democracy-destructive patterns. Nations have complexes that set up shadow governments of their egos. Egos that have become mana personalities, convinced of their own divine right to rule and rob. To give up on democracy by denying it the analytical treatment it deserves would be to collude with hopelessness, thus naturalizing the decline in governance in absurd ways. They could only be faced if seen as nightmares that can still be analyzed while democracy is on the couch. And let us not fear the psychedelic effect of the insights that will emerge if couch time gives democracy back its self-reflective instinct. There has always been the hope that if the door of perception were cleansed, everything would appear to man as it is, infinite. We certainly do not need to fear exposing democracy's desire. It is not to dominate, but to deliver the cornucopia of choice to everyone who is willing to practice it. Thank you. Thank you, Stefan.